So he says, my son, listen to what I have to say. Sometimes he'll speak as a mother, and sometimes he compares wisdom to the good and faithful wife, giving her wisdom and advice to her husband. So here it says, Shma beni musar avicha ve'al titosh torati mecha. My son, listen to the teachings of your father, and do not abandon those of your mother. Shma beni musar avicha ve'al titosh torati mecha. And we saw that King Solomon compares wisdom to the beautiful diamonds that someone might wear as a necklace. If you adopt the wisdom that I'm teaching you, it will be like the diamonds on your head or on you're wearing around your neck. Then he goes on to speak in a way that you would often hear a parent telling their teenage child. My son, if the sinful ones, if the wicked ones try and entice you and drag you into their ways, do not be seduced, do not take their advice. And now he says, Im yomru lecha itanu, if they tell you, come with us and join our group, our clan, come join us, and they tell you, Im yomru lecha itanu ne'erva ledam, let us make profit by really devouring someone else. Let us, have some kind of Ponzi scheme, something that's going to rid someone else of what is rightfully theirs and give it to you. What if they say, let us ambush someone who's innocent? We will swallow them up as if we are the sheol, the abyss. And they're trying to bring you in for profit. They're basically telling you, if someone comes to you and says, join me, I want you to come so that we can make a huge profit and we're going to swallow alive the other person. As a teenager or as someone who gets very excited, you may feel the need to follow their heed, to follow their clan, to feel a sense of belonging. King Solomon says, they will try and convince you by saying, look, there's going to be an extraordinary amount of money in this. Do not listen to them. Do not listen, even if they tell you kol hon yakar nimtza. Even if they tell you we will find every treasure, still do not listen to them, because what they're really saying is they're saying we are going to take what belongs to someone else. And soon King Solomon really shares one of the most beautiful analogies in the book, one of the most famous ones. So he's just to put yourself in the shoes here. Maybe you're thinking of this as a parent, maybe you're thinking of this as a friend, maybe you're thinking of this as a teenager. You're going to see people who try and draw you into do what's wrong, and King Solomon says, do not listen to them. I remember, I don't know if any of you watched there was this whole show on HBO about Bernie Madoff and how he got to where he got. And you wonder, how did someone get from point A to point B in their life where they probably would never have recognized themselves previously? And so King Solomon says, how do you avoid such things? It's not that you have to avoid the actual crime at the end, it's you have to avoid the entire path. And this is something that's very popular today when people talk about coaching, when people talk about the success. The key to success and the key to avoiding the opposite of success is habits. It's not through the actual action, it's the habits. There's a saying, words become habits, habits become actions, and actions become your legacy. So King Solomon says, if you want to succeed, if you want to do well in life, if you want to avoid the sinful person, make sure you're looking at the path. And so when he's advising his own son, he's saying, Mena raglecha menitivatam. Avoid the entire path. It's not the actual crime that they're committing that's going to stop you. It's way earlier. It's the path that leads down there. That is what you should avoid. And he says in we're in chapter 1, verse 16, Ki raglehem l'raya rutzu v'maru lishpoch dam. It may not be apparent but actually it's a path that leads to bloodshed. It's a path that leads to the worst of crimes. And so when you have the option of joining the company of people who are good people on the right path or people who are on the wrong path, make sure you realize where the other path might take you. And now he says a very, very beautiful analogy. I don't know if anyone ever saw in the National Geographic movies, but sometimes when, actually today it's used in a good context, but sometimes when they want to give a bird, a wild bird, an eagle, a hawk, they want to give them a shot, or there's a poacher who's trying to catch them. How does the poacher catch the bird? Well, the poacher, or thank God, today there's many organizations that are doing it to care for rare birds that are facing extinction. But in the case King Solomon is talking about, he's talking about a poacher who's trying to hunt a bird. And so what does the poacher do? He takes out a trap and he puts on the trap food. Now, what's the bird thinking when it's going for that food? What's the bird is looking at that food. What's the bird thinking? The bird is thinking, oh my goodness, free food. And sometimes not only might the bird think it's free food, but they may think, oh, I'm so smart, I'm getting someone else's lunch. However, what does the bird need to realize? What advice would you have given that bird? You would have said, be careful, because that free food is actually going to cost you your life. And so King Solomon says, when there is temptation that seems free, look, there's this great deal, and why don't you join us? You'll have to cut a few corners. You'll have to do the few things that are not super kosher, but there's the deal. King Solomon says, just remember the bird. Remember the bird is looking at the food in the trap, and it's like, oh, free lunch. And so don't be tempted. Do not be tempted when you see something free. Ki chinam mezorah hareshet. The plate of food on the bird trap seems free. Chinam seems free. Beinei kol ba'al kanaf. Any bird looking at it looks and says, wow, free lunch. I'm so excited. Ken orchot kol botzei betza. That is the way of anyone who is trying to rob someone else of their money. That is their path. They are trying to rob someone of money, and they say, oh, look, I'm going to get something free. But actually, in the end, they are robbing themselves. Again, going back to the example of someone like Bernie Madoff. So he thought he's getting money from others, but in fact, it cost him his own life and legacy doing something wrong. So there's something beautiful about this verse, because King Solomon says, if someone tries to seduce you and entice you to join an unholy path, an unkosher path, just remember where that path may lead you to, where it's going to. And secondly, remember, when they show you a reward that's not appropriate, that you shouldn't be getting, which it's something that comes in an unholy way, just remember the bird that's looking at the food in the trap and is saying, yay, free lunch, but actually it is a trap for themselves. So he's reminding you that there's a consequence at the end that you may not want to find yourself on. So that's this paragraph where King Solomon speaks as a father to his child, saying, don't take temptation, don't follow evildoers, and remember that if you do, that may cost you your own life by going for something that you're not supposed to do. Now, King Solomon in chapter 1, verse 20, again, for those looking it up online, it's Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20, says something so beautiful. And he compares the wisdom, the Torah, to a righteous woman. Chochmot b'chutz tarona. Wisdom has nothing to hide. Wisdom that is right, upright, and with integrity has nothing to hide. B'chutz tarona. It speaks outside. It speaks proudly. Barchovot titen kola. She goes out to the street and she speaks freely. That is sort of, if you want to think about it in New York terms, that is Lady Liberty, right? So Lady Liberty, the righteous woman, or I think there's also a Lady Justice, right? She's standing with the scales of justice. She has nothing to hide. She is going out, she's going to the street, and she shares her wisdom. Berosh homiot tikra. She has no problem to go out to the marketplace and offer her ideas. Befitchei she'arim ba'ir amarei tomer. Where does Lady Liberty, Lady Justice, Lady Wisdom, in this case, offer what she has to say? In the street, in the marketplace, there's nothing to hide. And that is where she says what she has to say. The rabbis point out about this verse that that's how the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. The Torah is given at Mount Sinai in front of the entire nation of Israel with thunder, lightning. Everyone witnessed it. There was nothing to hide. There's no element of secrecy. So that is when you see something is wisdom, then it's always done, not always, but most often it's done in the form of open discussion and transparency. And so the wisdom goes out to the street and she says, Ad matai pteim tavu peti, until when will the people who are seeking the wrongdoers to be wrongdoers or to be unwise, until when will you seek that? And by saying that, she means that when people do evil, it comes in two ways. Sometimes it comes in a way of actually choosing evil, and sometimes it comes in a way of just ignorance and slipping into it. If you want to avoid that, what you need to do is listen. You got to listen to wisdom. You have to listen to the options and look forward to doing the right thing. Another way of avoiding wisdom, which, by the way, King Solomon speaks out a lot about, is the idea of latzon, which means mockery. Sometimes, and again, this is very true with teenagers, the way people avoid what is right is by mockery. You know, you're doing the right thing as a teenager and all the cool kids are saying, oh, what are you, some goody good? Yeah. Or you think about people who lost their lives in duels, right? How many people lost their lives in duels because someone said, oh, what are you, a chicken? And they made fun of them. And so they lost their life because they just didn't want to be a chicken, which is, they succumbed to peer pressure, to mockery. So King Solomon says, don't fall for that. Don't be, latzon is one of the primary ways of leading people into wrongdoing. So, people might mock you and say, oh, what are you doing that? What are you, ridiculous? What are you, a righteous person? And so King Solomon says, if you want to do the right thing, make sure that your eyes are set on what you want to do, and do not be afraid of people who mock you. So he says, you think also, by the way, about a lot of the most creative ideas, and some of the most creative ideas in the world were mocked. The greatest innovations were originally mocked. How many innovators gave up on what they wanted to do because they were mocked? I forgot the name of the doctor, but about 200 years ago or so, there was a doctor during an outbreak in, I believe, London, who told the other physicians that one of the reasons the disease is spreading in their hospital is because people are not washing their hands. And he was mocked and actually put into a mental asylum. And so you think, how many innovators, how many discoverers would there have been had people not given up their ideas, their passions, because others mocked them? So King Solomon says, look, be careful, avoid those who mock you. And he says, those who love mockery, you have to stop that. And until when will those who despise wisdom continue to do so? And so on with the theme of Lady Wisdom. Remember, there's Lady Liberty, Lady Justice, and in the case of King Solomon, there's Lady Wisdom. She's going outside to the streets and she's telling people, follow the wise path. Verse 23, Tashuvu letochachti, come listen to what I have to say. Hine abia lachem ruchi, I will express to you my spirit. Odia dvarai etchem, and sometimes I will have to come to you to give you my wisdom. Did you ever have a friend that was doing something and you knew they're doing something wrong, and you gave them your advice and they were like, no, I don't want to listen to your advice? And so that's what's going on here. The people tell wisdom, they say, look, I'm not interested. And so she says, look, in this case, I'm going to repeat myself and I'm going to pursue and beg you to follow my path. Yan karati v'tima'enu. When you disregard my advice, I'm going to call out again and again. And this reminds me of a very beautiful thought we read after Tisha B'Av. It says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort, comfort my nation. Why does it say comfort, comfort my nation after Tisha B'Av? So one of the explanations given is because the Jewish people are sometimes so oppressed. The Jewish people are so discouraged by all the persecution they go through that when God himself comes and says, I want to comfort you, my people, we don't listen. We won't take it because we're so heartbroken. We're so devastated by what we've been through that we don't listen. So that's why the prophet Isaiah says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, twice, comfort, comfort my people. Sometimes someone is so hurt and so offended that if you say it just once, it's not going to go over. You have to come again and again. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. And so King Solomon says also, wisdom does the same thing. Wisdom says once, listen, I want you to hear what I have to say. And then when people don't listen the first time, then the wisdom sort of expresses itself again and says, look, please listen to what I have to say, because really that's what's good for you. And so she tries again and again. And she says, Yan karati vatemenu, I've called out, but sometimes people refuse. Sometimes people, despite the best advice you give them and the best information that's out there, people do not listen. Natiti yadai ven makshiv. She says, I even stretched out my arm and I said, come here and listen to me. And still people do not listen. Vatifra'u kol atzati v'tochachti lo avitem. And now we come to a very sad part of the chapter. And that is, sometimes when people refuse good advice, when people refuse wisdom again and again and again, eventually what happens? Well, unfortunately, eventually the consequences set in. And then wisdom says, I'll be looking when the consequences for your actions come. And what am I going to say? Because I warned you many, many times. And by the way, here's a word that is simple in the biblical context, but yet has an extraordinary magnitude when it comes to our day and age. Why? The word shoah in the Bible means darkness. And so it's used several times, sometimes in a pretty casual way. The word shoah means to us something completely different. After the Holocaust, people looked for words for what was done because there was no parallel to it. So it's actually interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but the word genocide was coined by a Jewish person after the Holocaust, the word genocide. And you see people use it so freely today, and anti-Semites use it towards Israel. Actually, the word genocide itself was coined after the Holocaust. The word Holocaust also, there was nothing that was a parallel to it. And so the word Shoah means darkness. It means a dark tragedy. And again, in the Bible, it could mean a dark tragedy in a much smaller way than what we're talking about in the Holocaust context. But Lady Wisdom says, if you continue down the path of refusing wisdom, then what you feared most is going to come like a Shoah. It's going to come like a dark tragedy. So again, it doesn't mean like the Shoah that we are used to discussing, which is the Holocaust, but it means just a dark tragedy. And then sometimes it's going to be too late. If you didn't heed the words of Lady Wisdom, then eventually there's nothing I will be able to do. Then there will be a point there's nothing I can do. They will seek me and they will not find me. Eventually they will not find me. Why? Eventually, and we have such verses in the Torah, which are always very painful to read. We have verses that say, look, there's going to be a time where there's nothing I can do for you. There's going to be a time where you cross the point of no return. And that is something I won't be able to reverse. I won't be able to change. So she says, look, you should try to listen to me. And she goes out to the streets and she speaks and she begs, but then she says, eventually there's going to come a point where there's nothing I can do for you. There's nothing I can absolutely do because you have not listened to my wisdom. You have not listened to my advice. Eventually, the evildoers will eat from the fruit of their path, and they will be satiated from what they did. Once again, what is the key to success? There's a great book, by the way, by a fellow named Steve Covey, The 7 Habits of Successful People, and it's all about habits. So too here, she says, listen, if you want to succeed, look at your habits, look at what your habit is, and it's about the derech, it's about the path. King Solomon repeatedly speaks about the path of the righteous and the path of the wicked. Being righteous does not happen in one day. Being wicked does not happen in one day. It's all about the path you choose, the little habits that you develop. That is where your legacy goes. Again, I mentioned the saying, which says, words become habits, words become actions, actions become habits, and habits become legacy. And so you really need to watch the small things that you do every day. If you want a significant change in your actions, in your life, and your legacy, always look for the small changes, the habits, the thing you do every day, and that is where the secret to success or its opposite may lay. Because the people who eventually resist, the words of wisdom, the words of righteousness eventually end up, that ends up being their downfall. And sometimes even just the tranquility of complacency, of not paying attention to your path, not reevaluating. I know we speak about this a lot on Rosh Hashanah, right? The shofar is about waking you up and asking you about the path you're on. Sometimes that path is something that's going to lead you to your greatest success. And if you don't, it is going to lead you to the opposite of your success. We are now on Mishlei, Proverbs, chapter 2. Chapter 2 begins with the word that King Solomon likes the most. What's the word King Solomon likes the most? B'ni, my child, because again, there's so much wisdom out there, but who do you listen? Whose advice do you take? You don't just take any advice. You take the advice of someone who loves you. You take the advice of someone who cares for you. And so King Solomon, whenever he's addressing and asking people to follow his wisdom, he is saying, look, listen to me, my son, because again, he's addressing it in a way that he's saying it out of love. He's saying, look, I'm not giving you this advice to boss you around. I'm not giving you this advice because I'm arrogant and think that what I have to say is better than others. It's because I care for you. It's because I'm thinking about you. So he always starts with the word bini, my child. Im tikach amarai, if you listen to what I have to say, and you take my commandments with you, lehakshiv lachochma oznecha, to pay attention with your ear to wisdom, tateh libcha letvuna, and make sure your heart is attentive to the wisdom. Ki im labina tikra, if you call out for wisdom, latvuna titen kolecha, and you call out to wisdom and ask for it. By the way, the rabbis say that if you want wisdom to be for you, actually the Talmud in Masechet Kiddushin says the following: if you want wisdom to be your share, you should treat it like your own mother. You should treat it like your mother, meaning you should always familiarize yourself with it, just like you would never wake up and not recognize the voice of your mother. So too you're familiar with wisdom. Now there's a verse that
Rabbi, is someone speaking
on the cloth that's on the Aron Kodesh? It's on the parochet, and it goes as following. It's about the Torah. Im tevakshena kakesef. If you seek wisdom like money, like silver, v'chamatmonim techapsena, and you seek wisdom like the treasures, you seek wisdom like the someone who's looking for a big treasure, as tavin yirat Hashem, then you will know the fear of God, and then you will know wisdom. And this is exactly why the book is called Mishlei, because a mashal means an allegory, a proverb that can be taken literally and can be taken also in a deeper level. If you want to succeed in something, look for it like you're looking for a treasure. Success doesn't just fall on your lap. Success is something that you have to seek. Similarly, wisdom is not something that is just going to fall on your lap. You're going to have to seek it out. There are so many people who are born brilliant and smart, but what makes the difference between someone who's successful and unsuccessful? It's someone who actually pursues what they are passionate about, someone who puts in work, I'm forgetting for a moment the name of the author who wrote the 10,000 hour book. Maybe someone can put it in the chat. But there's this author. He's the author of the book of David and Goliath. It's going to come back to me in a minute. Maybe someone's going to remind me of it. There's a book called David and Goliath. I forgot the name of the author, but anyhow, he wrote a very famous book about the importance of giving things 10,000 hours. If you want to succeed in something, you have to give it 10,000 hours. Do we have someone? Was anyone able to find it? That book?
Malcolm Gladwell.
Righty. We'll see.
Malcolm
If not, I'm going to post about it later. But it's not Stephen Covey. Anyhow, the idea is that if you want something, if you really seek something and want to succeed in it, you need to make sure that you're giving it your fullest. It's not something that's going to come to you. If you seek it the same way people seek money and silver. And thank you, Julia. Excellent. Terrific. Thank you. Julia, thank you. It's Malcolm Gladwell. So Malcolm Gladwell has a few books, and one of them speaks about success and what makes the most successful people most successful at what they do. He's not just talking about business. He's talking about academics, sports, and he outlines this 10,000 hour rule, which is that people who are real major experts in their field have been working at it for 10,000 hours. It's not something that just, Michael Jordan didn't just wake up Michael Jordan. Bill Gates didn't just wake up Bill Gates. It's something that you work on. And similarly with Torah and wisdom, if you want to succeed, you have to seek it. You have to seek it. In fact, with Torah, they say that even if a person is not born very smart, but they really put in their work into it, they pray, they try, then Hashem is going to bless them with that wisdom. If you seek it like money and silver, and you seek it like a treasure, Az tavini yirat Hashem, then you will know the wisdom of Hashem, the dat Elokim timtza, and you will find the knowledge of God. And now we come to a verse that actually summarizes the life of Joseph, which we finished reading about as we concluded the book of Bereshit. Ki Hashem yiten chokhmah mipiv. Wisdom comes from God. Joseph comes and meets with Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, you must be the smartest person I have ever met. And what does Joseph say? No, wisdom comes from Hashem. Wisdom comes from God. He stands in front of the king of Egypt, who never even heard of Hashem. And he says, look, the wisdom is not mine. The wisdom comes from God. So that is the idea that we conclude with. So just to wrap up some of the ideas that we've seen. One is that wisdom is something that speaks openly, has nothing to be ashamed of. It's said out in the streets. Secondly, is that eventually the wisdom tries again and again to get you to listen to her. But eventually, if someone doesn't listen, there's nothing she can do. And then the consequences come in. The idea of if you want to give someone advice, do it out of a place of love. Bini, he's always speaking to someone as their child. And lastly, if you want to succeed, it's in your habits and in your passion for pursuing it. It's not just going to happen. You have to pursue it the same way people pursue gold, silver, and hunt for a treasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. It was such an honor, such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really wanted to thank IT, who made this happen, and everyone who took out of their busy schedules to be here with us today. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue next Wednesday. And I really thank everyone for being with us today. Bezrat Hashem, it should be a happy, a healthy week for everyone. And